The dropout of FTL felt wrong before the alarms even sounded. Bren Hale's stomach lurched as the Lux Aeterna tore back into real space, the transition rougher than any textbook deceleration curve. Red auxiliary lighting flooded the bridge, painting every console and face the color of old blood. The air carried its usual tang of recycled oxygen, but underneath that sat something sharper tonight. Electrical, ozone heavy, the scent of a storm that had not yet broken. Report. Captain Male Cendric did not raise his voice. He never needed to. Hale pulled up the nav display, fingers moving before his brain caught up. Dropped us at the edge of the filament, sir. Drift is within tolerances. He paused, squinting at a secondary reading. Picking up an energy signature. Bearing 271 Mark 14. Range, close. Define close. 1.3 light seconds. Inside the nebula. Cendric turned his head slightly, the silver at his temples catching the red light. One knuckle tapped against the armrest of his command chair. Tap, tap, tap. Then stillness. That's impossible, Ensign Taryn Lask muttered from the engineering station. She was chewing the inside of her cheek again, her fingers buried in a diagnostic panel. No bodies charted in this filament. We're supposed to be the first ship through here. She did not look up from her failing coolant readouts. And my port coil is bleeding heat like a stuck vein. So if we're going to chase ghosts, I need notice. You'll have it, Cendric said. Dr. Aldrin. Spectrograph. Quince. Aldrin was already hunched over his console, his back a curved silhouette against the flicker of data. He blinked once. Twice. The slow, deliberate blink of a mind slotting puzzle pieces into place. His voice came out flat. Even for him. The signature is coherent, repeating pulse structure at 4.7-second intervals. Too precise for stellar noise. Too stable for a pulsar fragment. Another blink. And it is coming from a planetary mass object that should not exist. Nebula filaments lack the density to form planets. This is misplaced matter. Hale felt the back of his neck prickle. He rubbed at it with one hand, a habit he could never break fast enough. Captain, if it's artificial and it's sitting inside uncharted territory, standing orders say we mark it and let Fleet Xenology handle the contact protocol. Cendric's knuckle tapped once more. Standing orders were written for charted space, Mr. Hale. We are 200 light years past the last relay beacon. If we run home every time the galaxy surprises us, we will never learn what lives in the gaps. Sir, take us in. Slow approach. Lask, give me passive sensors only. I want to see this thing before it notices us. Hale opened his mouth, closed it. His hand dropped from his neck. The Lux Aeterna banked, thrusters firing in short, controlled bursts, and the nebula swallowed them whole. The rogue planetoid resolved out of the filament's haze like a clenched fist. Barely 600 kilometers across, its surface was a smooth, dark glass, as though something had melted the crust and let it cool too fast. No craters, no tectonic scars. The impact basin near the equator was the sole imperfection, a shallow bowl 20 kilometers wide, and at its center stood the pillar. Lask brought them down 300 meters from the structure, landing gear crunching onto the glassy stone. The sound carried through the hull like breaking ice. Through the viewport, the pillar rose 40 meters high, a spiral of obsidian black material that drank the ship's floodlights and gave nothing back. Faint purple light moved beneath its surface, slow and rhythmic, like a heartbeat. I am reading surface temperatures of -80 Celsius ambient, Aldrin said. The small audio recorder in his breast pocket was already running. Hale could see the red indicator light. The structure is colder. Enthalpy readings suggest it has been radiating thermal deficit for a minimum of 12,000 years. It's a freezer, Lask said. A 12,000-year-old freezer sitting in a crater on a planet that shouldn't exist. Nothing about this is fine. Cendric stood, the motion unhurried. Mr. Hale, Dr. Aldrin, suit up. We are going to take a closer look. Captain, I strongly recommend. Hale started. Your objection is noted and logged. Suit up. The airlock cycled with a hiss that faded into vacuum silence. Hale's boots hit the crater floor, and the sound transmitted up through his suit as a dull, bone-conducted crunch. The planetoid had no atmosphere, no wind, no seismic tremor. The absence of noise was so complete, it became a presence, a pressure against the eardrums that had nothing to press against. Aldrin walked beside him, his helmet lamp sweeping across the glassy stone. Cendric took point, moving with the same calm he carried on the bridge. The pillar loomed closer with every step. The purple light beneath its surface did not brighten. It simply pulsed. 4.7-second intervals. Hale's suit chrono ticked in the corner of his visor, and the timing matched perfectly. Cendric stopped 3 meters from the base. Aldrin, surface composition. Unknown. Spectrometry is returning null matches across all cataloged mineral databases. The material is non-reflective in visible wavelengths and partially transparent to infrared. A pause. It is drinking the light. Noted. Cendric extended a gloved hand toward the pillar's surface. I'm going to collect a contact sample. Captain, Hale's voice came out tighter than he intended. We do not know what this is. That is precisely why we are here. The captain's glove touched the obsidian. The pillar ignited. Purple light did not flicker or build. It erupted. A column of violent, bruise-deep fire shot upward from the spiral's apex, silent in the vacuum. And in the half-second before Hale's visor auto-dimmed, he saw Cendric silhouetted against it. The captain's suit held its shape. Nothing breached it. Nothing burned through. But the man inside was simply gone. One moment, Cendric was there, his hand still extended. The next, the suit stood empty, its gloves and boots still locked in position, and a fine particulate drifted inside the helmet where a face should have been. Hale's legs moved before his mind caught up. He grabbed Aldrin by the chest rig and hauled backward, boots skidding on glass. Aldrin was shouting something, the words lost to the roar of blood in Hale's ears. The pillar's purple fire kept climbing, silent and absolute, and now the ground was vibrating. A low, subsonic growl that traveled up through Hale's soles and into his teeth. He ran, dragging Aldrin. Crunch, crunch, crunch. The Lux Aeterna's cargo ramp was still open, Lask silhouetted in the airlock, her mouth moving in a scream he could not hear. The ramp closed. The ship lifted. Hale collapsed against the bulkhead, still gripping Aldrin's suit, and the vibration followed them into the void. Every deck plate hummed with it, a continuous growling frequency just below the threshold of hearing. Cendric's suit was still standing on the crater floor, empty. Lask got them to minimum safe distance before Hale found his way to the bridge, 40,000 kilometers out, passive sensors still running. The hum had not diminished. He stopped at the command chair, Cendric's chair. The armrest was worn smooth where the captain's knuckle had tapped it 1,000 times. Hale stood there, one hand half raised toward the seat back, and he could smell burned insulation and worse clinging to his suit liner. The rest of the bridge crew was watching him. Lask at engineering, her face pale beneath the emergency lighting. Aldrin at the science station, still trembling, his audio recorder still running. Hale's hand moved to the back of his neck. Froze there. He lowered it. Get us to minimum safe distance. His voice cracked on the last syllable. That was all. Lask nodded once and turned to her console. Aldrin did not move. He was staring at his spectrograph readout, his slow blink returning, but his hands were shaking against the interface. First Officer Hale. What is it, Doctor? The beacon's signal has altered. Aldrin's voice stayed flat. It was the flattest thing Hale had ever heard. It is no longer a repeating pulse. The structure is modulated now, content-bearing. He turned from the screen, and his eyes were wider than Hale had ever seen them. The beacon is transmitting, and something is answering. Hale looked at the sensor plot. Beyond the planetoid, deep in the nebula filament where no light lived, a new contact was forming. Too large to be a ship, too fast to be an asteroid. It moved against the grain of local gravity, and the signal it was sending back matched the beacon's modulation precisely. The vibration in the deck plates deepened. The main viewer was still showing empty space when the emptiness began to bend. Bren Hale gripped the armrest of the captain's chair, not his chair, never his chair, and watched a smear of violet congeal out of the nebula's filament edge. It rippled like heat shimmer over sun-scorched stone. Then it hardened into a warship. Black hull, asymmetrical spines twisting against the starfield. The same sick glow that pulsed beneath the surface of the pillar on the planetoid bled through its flanks. No visible source for the light, Aldrin said from the comm station. His voice stayed flat. His hands, Hale noticed, did not. They trembled above the console keys. The illumination appears intrinsic to the hull material, non-reflective, self-luminous. The bridge stank of burnt conduits. Emergency power only. Half the consoles flickered amber and red. The rest stayed dark. Lask's voice came through the open engineering channel, raw and chewing. Tell me that's not another one. One vessel? Hale said. His own voice sounded steadier than he felt. Aldrin, hail them. All frequencies. Standard first contact package. Translate matrix included. Transmitting now. The Voidflare craft answered before Aldrin finished the word. A single pulse slammed through the Lux Aeterna's forward sensor arrays and blew 3 starboard shield generators in the space of a heartbeat. The ship bucked. A console behind Hale spat a fountain of sparks and died. The reek of burnt insulation thickened. Copper coated the back of his throat. Shields at 41%, Aldrin said. Flat. Hands still unsteady. That was not a weapon discharge. The pulse profile matches a communication burst. High bandwidth. Extreme amplitude. They spoke. He blinked slowly, processing input. They spoke, and we nearly lost containment on the entire starboard grid. Hale's stomach nodded. Lask. Engines. 90 seconds. The channel erupted with a sound halfway between a laugh and a snarl. 90 seconds. You want miracles, Hale. Call a priest. I have a port coil bleeding plasma into the secondary housing. Half the reactor safeties are locked down from the shield surge. The bypass protocols are sequenced. They cannot be skipped. You have a plasma cutter. That'll void every warranty ever written, and 3 that haven't been drafted yet. 90 seconds. She cut the channel. Hale could picture her chewing the inside of her cheek until it bled. He rubbed the back of his own neck and stared at the viewer. The enemy ship was turning. No visible thrusters. No drive signature. It simply reoriented, slow and deliberate, the way a predator adjusts its weight before a lunge. Aldrin tilted his head. His fingers moved across his console in short, precise taps. The carrier wave matches the beacon's frequency. Identical modulation pattern. Identical phase alignment. The deck plates throbbed underfoot as he spoke. A low, subsonic pulse that locked into the same rhythm as the beacon's cry. They are not transmitting to us. They are transmitting through the beacon, or the beacon is transmitting through them. A relay, or a loudspeaker. Aldrin's voice didn't change, but his next words came slower. The beacon remains active on the surface. Captain Cendric. The name hung in the burnt air. Cendric had stayed at the pillar when the first pulse hit. He had been working the access panel, gloved fingers tracing symbols older than human civilization. The channel went silent 40 seconds later. No scream, no warning. Just a wet crunch that Hale would hear for the rest of his life. And then, nothing at all. Focus on the ship, Hale said. Engines are green. Lask's voice burst through the bridge speaker, high and wild. Hot-wired, bypassed, and running on a prayer to every god of obsolete engineering. We can burn in 30 seconds. Too long. They're lining up. The enemy vessel had completed its turn. Violet light gathered along its forward spines, concentrating the same way it concentrated in the beacon's core. Liquid light. Light with mass. Hale looked at the weapons console. The plasma lance charge indicator glowed amber. Full capacitor charge. Ready to fire, and useless. Entirely useless against a target that absorbed a full-power comms burst like a shout in a hurricane. Unless... Hale stared at the charge indicator, then at the comms dish status panel, then back at the indicator. Lask? What now? The plasma lance shunted its capacitors into the comms dish. The silence that followed was the loudest thing on the bridge. That's not a thing, Lask said. Her edge had vanished. Something quieter filled its place. That's not a thing anyone would ever do. The dish emitter isn't rated for that energy. It'll melt. The Voidflare uses specific carrier frequency to communicate. Aldrin, you have it? Aldrin blinked once. Twice. 3 times. Locked. Modulation pattern and phase encoding captured from their last transmission. But the power required to saturate their sensor architecture. The capacitors are full. Dump every volt across their own channel. Scream until they can't hear. Lask made a sound. A laugh, maybe. Despair, possibly. You want me to turn the comms array into a jammer powered by the weapon grid? How long? 15 seconds to shunt the power conduits. Hale. She paused. He heard her swallow. If the dish fails before the charge empties, do it. He heard her move. Heard the distinctive high-frequency whine of plasma lance capacitors bleeding into a system they were never meant to feed. The whine climbed higher. A shriek now, no longer a whine. The bridge lights dimmed and flickered as power drained from every non-critical system aboard the ship. On the viewer, the Voidflare vessel's forward spines flared bright, ready to fire. The comms dish screamed. Hale had no better word. The transmission ripped across the Voidflare's own carrier wave at full capacitor strength, a solid wall of raw, unfiltered noise. Every frequency saturated simultaneously, every channel drowned in the electromagnetic equivalent of a solar flare. The enemy craft shuddered. Its shot went wide. Purple light scattered across the nebula's edge like thrown paint. Full burn, Hale ordered. Now. The Lux Aeterna's engines lit. The roar came through the deck plates and climbed into Hale's teeth, into his skull, into the hollow space where dread had been living for the past 3 minutes. Artificial gravity hiccuped and dropped to half for one stomach-lurching second before stabilizing. The ship surged forward, angling hard toward the gas giant dominating the system's outer reaches. Behind them, the Voidflare vessel listed in place, its sensor arrays spasmed with random light. Blinded. Staggering. Ring system intercept in 30 seconds, Aldrin said. Ice particles hit the hull. 1,000,000 tiny impacts. Soft bells ringing through the metal. Hale cut the engines and killed everything. Everything. Lights, consoles, gravity. Every system that drew power. Every emitter that could betray their position. The Lux Aeterna drifted dark and silent among the frozen debris. Only life support remained, cycling at minimum draw, a whisper in the walls. Weightlessness took hold. Hale's stomach floated upward. Or perhaps that was simply fear. Time stretched. 20 seconds became a minute. A minute became 5. Breath slowed across the bridge. The ice hissed against the hull in a steady, lulling rhythm. Aldrin's voice came from the darkness, quiet and steady. The steadiness itself was a warning. I managed a partial decode of the Voidflare carrier signal during the transmission burst. The faint blue glow of his console was the only light on the bridge now. It painted his face in hollows. The signal contained a territorial declaration, a claim of domain. The beacon is designated. He paused. His fingers stopped moving. It is called the voice of the precursor. The word hit the air and hung there, heavier than the silence before it. Aldrin did not wait to be asked. The term translates as a dark energy entity of extreme age. The Voidflare revere it as a forerunner, a master about to wake. The beacon is its herald. The deck thrummed again, a single low pulse that shivered up through Hale's boots. The message was not directed at us, Aldrin went on, that terrible steady quiet still in place. The beacon has been screaming since we landed, and we are not the only species listening. Another pause. His console chimed softly. Before our improvised jammer broke their sensor lock, the Voidflare vessel transmitted a summons. A response fleet will arrive within hours, perhaps less. The ice hissed. The ship drifted in the dark. Somewhere on the planetoid below, where an empty suit stood beside an obsidian pillar, the beacon kept screaming into the void, and the void was already answering. Hale stared at the dead viewer and felt the summons ticking in his chest like a second heartbeat. The observation chamber chimed with the harmonic resonance of the Gamari frigate's living core. Clean Pa stood motionless at the center of the crystalline dome, its facets catching the slow-moving rainbows that slid across the walls like oil on water. The ship hummed around it, a deep, steady note that vibrated through the deck and into Clean Pa's own structure, a constant reminder that the vessel was alive and watching. Zero projected the sensor data without preamble. The Mendrich aid did not speak. It simply opened a channel and let the recorded feed pour into the mind space between them, cold and impersonal, as a memory belonging to no one. Clean Paya perused the images as they bloomed. The human scout ship settling beside the beacon crater, three suited figures crossing the glassy stone, one of them reaching out with a gloved hand. Then the glove came off. A bare touch? Clean Paya chimed. Its harmonics came out tight and high, the bell-like clarity of its voice sharpening with something a human might have called disbelief. They activated a sealed void beacon with a bare touch, skin to surface. Ciro's presence in the mind space flickered, not quite a shrug, but the psionic equivalent, a ripple of patient neutrality. The Mindreach folded its long, pale fingers together and waited. It never offered opinions unasked. That was why Clan Pa kept it close. The recording advanced. The beacon's purple light intensified, and the human figures stumbled backward. One of them did not stumble fast enough. The captain, swallowed by a wave of dark energy that folded inward like collapsing silk, leaving nothing behind. Not a body, not a scream, not even a heat signature. The beacon had simply erased him. Reckless, Clean Pie intoned. They had no idea what they were touching. They rarely do. Ciro's projection carried a faint aftertaste of resignation. The feed jumped. The human ship lifted off in a clumsy, thruster-staggered ascent, its hull trailing plasma from a compromised engine coil. Then the Voidflare warship dropped out of warped space, all black hull and bleeding violet light, and Clonpaw felt a sympathetic vibration in its own facets, the same frequency the beacon used, the same frequency that had haunted Gamari patrols for 2,000 years. The Voidflare ship charged its spines. Liquid light gathered at the tips. The human vessel, crippled and outgunned, should have died in the next 4 seconds. It did not. Instead, the Lux Aeterna's comms dish flared with an energy surge that made no tactical sense. The plasma lance capacitors, Clean Pa replayed the sensor log, confirming what it saw. The humans had routed their weapon power directly into the communications array. The resulting burst hit the Voidflare ship not as damage, but as noise. A shrieking, howling wall of feedback that rode the enemy's own carrier wave back into their receivers. The Voidflare's spines dimmed. The warship shuddered and broke off its attack run. By the time it recovered, the human scout had limped out of effective range. Clean phase facets rippled. The rainbows in the chamber walls stuttered, refracting into jagged patterns as the Envoy's inner harmonics dropped into a lower, rougher register. That is not a tactic, Clean Fei chimed. That is a malfunction dressed as a plan. It worked, Ciro projected. It worked once. Clean Fei's facets hardened, aligning into a more rigid configuration. Against a hierarch who will adapt, the Voidflare learn. That same trick will not function twice. Ciro's presence pulsed with a question that it did not voice aloud. The mind space between them grew heavier, dense with unspoken implication. Clean Pie ignored it and returned to the beacon's activation log. The numbers did not improve. Signal amplitude was climbing, not stabilizing, not plateauing. Climbing. The precursor entity the beacon served was stirring, drawing slow breath after 12,000 years of dormancy, and every passing minute brought its waking consciousness closer to full awareness. 12,000 years. The Gamari had guarded this beacon for 2,000 of them, maintaining a quiet, ceaseless vigil that no other species in the sector knew about or needed to know about. The treaty that bound the Gamari to this duty was older than most living civilizations, and in one afternoon, a species that had possessed faster-than-light travel for less than 2 decades had undone millennia of careful containment. They should be destroyed, Ciro projected. The thought came wrapped in a texture of cold practicality. No malice, only mathematics. The Voidflare will return. The humans will not survive a second encounter. If they are captured, they will reveal everything they accidentally learned. Silence them now, and the beacon's location dies with them. Clean Fei's harmonics went very still. The silence stretched. The ship's living core hummed on, oblivious. Somewhere in the walls, a facet clicked as it realigned to catch a new angle of ambient light. Wasteful, Clean Fei chimed at last. The Voidflare will do the job you propose, and they will do it without requiring us to expend resources or compromise our diplomatic posture. Patience, Ciro. Ciro withdrew slightly. The mind space cooled by a fraction. But Clean Paw was not finished with the recording. It replayed the human escape a third time, and then a fourth. Not watching the Voidflare warship this time, watching the human vessel, the timing of the energy surge, the way they had bled their own shields to feed the capacitors. The moment of stillness on the bridge, visible only as a brief pause in the ship's erratic maneuvering, when someone had made a decision that no established tactical doctrine would ever recommend. Clean phase harmonics shifted. Lower, slower. The rainbows on the walls smoothed back into gentle curves. They improvise, it chimed. The words came out almost soft, a chime touched with something unfamiliar. They saw a weapon and used it as a voice. No Gamari commander would conceive of that. No Voidflare hierarch would predict it. Ciro's presence sharpened. That is exactly why they are dangerous. Yes. Clean phase facets realigned once more, locking into a pattern that felt like decision. Dangerous to everyone, including the Voidflare. The implication hung in the mind space, bright and cold. Clean Paya turned from the observation field and faced Ciro fully. The Mindreach aide stood motionless, its pale limbs catching the rainbows, its expression unreadable behind the smooth mask of its psionic discipline. But Clean Pie had known Ciro for decades. It felt the question pulsing beneath the silence. The old protocols are insufficient, Clean Pie chimed. We have guarded this beacon for 2,000 years and never found a way to silence it. The humans stumbled into it, activated it, and escaped a hierarch within the span of a single planetary rotation. Improvisation may have value after all. You intend to contact them. I intend to learn whether they can be used. Clean phase harmonics rang with bell-like finality. Prepare a tight beam message. Format it so their primitive decoders can process it. Offer parley. Include historical context, the beacon's origin, the precursor's nature, the Voidflare hegemony's interest, enough to make them understand what they have stumbled into, but not enough to arm them against us if this proves a miscalculation. Ciro did not move. The mind space between them prickled with something that felt almost like hesitation. That message will reveal our fear, Ciro projected. They will read it in the subtext, the urgency, the offer of alliance after 2 millennia of isolation. They will know we are afraid of the beacon. Clean phase facets caught the light and held it. The scent of ozone drifted through the chamber, faint and sharp, the byproduct of the ship's crystalline metabolism, always stronger when the core was processing stress. Then they will know the truth, Clean Pot chimed. Send the message. Ciro turned and walked out of the observation chamber, its footsteps soundless on the living crystal floor. The mind space collapsed behind it, leaving Clean Paw alone with the rainbows and the hum. In the observation field, the distant spark of the Lux Aeterna had faded to a faint glimmer. The Voidflare warship was gone too, retreated, regrouping, certainly planning. The beacon's signal continued to climb. Clean Paw waited. The tight beam burst outward, racing toward a damaged human ship full of frightened primates who had just done something impossible. Somewhere inside its structured harmonics, embedded in the historical data and the careful diplomatic phrasing, was a truth the Gamari had not meant to reveal and could not now take back. The Guardians were afraid, and they needed help. The analysis tank's shimmer held the Gamari message in a spiral of cold light, and the longer Bren Hale stared at it, the more the guilt became a weight he could feel in his molars. 3 hours since the Voidflare warship had disengaged. 3 hours since he had watched the forward camera record of Captain Cendric vanishing into that pillar and done nothing, still standing in the airlock with his hand half raised. The image would not leave him. It pulsed behind his eyelids every time he blinked. Dr. Aldrin leaned close to the tank, one fingertip tracing a sliver of the display. His voice stayed flat. The Gamari envoy included a full sensory history package. Our translation matrix can render the narrative, but the experiential layer requires direct interface. He tapped a secondary screen, and a low chime sounded. Viewing it feels like ice at the temples. I recommend you avoid prolonged exposure. I'll keep that in mind, Hale said. His own voice sounded hollow. Ensign Lask stood in the hatchway, arms crossed, the grease still black under her nails. She had not spoken since coming down from engineering, but her presence had a density to it. She chewed the inside of her cheek and watched Aldrin with the flat focus of someone cataloging a machine for faults. Aldrin pulled up a segment of the Gamari record, and the cabin dimmed as the tank scattered prismatic light across the data slates. The narration began to scroll, but Aldrin overrode it with his own muttered translation. He always did that, as if the original words were incomplete until he spoke them himself. 12,411 standard years ago, Aldrin said, a dark energy entity that the Gamari call the Precursor consumed 3 systems, not conquered. Consumed. The record describes planetary masses reduced to dispersed particle clouds and stellar fusion halted by cascading vacuum decay. The ancient powers of the era, the Gamari, the Mindreach, the Abyssal, the Root Mind, formed an armada and drove the entity into a dimensional fold. They could not kill it. They built a lock. He touched another glyph, and the image shifted into something deeper, a dream texture that did in fact feel cold at the temples. Hale flinched. The void beacon is the lock, Aldrin said. Not the key. It calls the Precursor awake. The Voidflare were designated as jailers, a species already adapted to dark energy interfaces, tasked with guarding the fold. Their hegemony held the mandate for 11 millennia. But at some point, the Gamari are unclear. The Voidflare reinterpreted their role. They became jailers turned worshippers. The beacon is no longer a leash. It is a summoning bell. Lask shifted in the hatchway. So we didn't just trip over a relic. No, Aldrin said. We rang a doorbell that a dozen older species have spent millennia pretending did not exist. The Voidflare now believe the Precursor's return will begin a new cycle of conquest. The Gamari record includes precise sensor signatures from the last awakening attempts. The warship that attacked us was not an anomaly. It was a guardian come to ensure the cycle completes. Hale rubbed the back of his neck. The motion felt automatic now. What happens if the beacon can't be shut down? He asked. He already knew the answer would be bad. Aldrin pulled up a schematic woven from layered Gamari memory facets. The beacon at the center. A spherical wave propagating outward. A notation that translated to an energy release profile equivalent to planetary-scale weapon discharge. Only self-sustaining. Only growing. When the call completes, he said, the Precursor re-enters normal space at the beacon's location. The beacon itself then transforms. It becomes the focal aperture for an extinction event. The Gamari language is unemotional by nature, but the experiential record attached to this segment carries what I can only describe as institutional horror. The deck vibrated underfoot, a low, persistent throb that had been there since the beacon activated and was getting no quieter. Hale had stopped noticing it an hour ago. Now he noticed again. Lask uncrossed her arms and took one step inside the science bay. So we can't fight the Voidflare fleet. We can't outrun them. And we've got a doomsday pillar singing a phone call that's already half finished. She looked at Aldrin, then at Hale. What else can the beacon do besides broadcast? You're the language expert. Does it listen? Aldrin's slow blink filled the silence. He turned back to the tank without a word and began paging through the Gamari data again. Faster now, the light flickering against his spectacles. Hale saw the hatchway light catch the corner of Lask's mouth, the faintest twitch of satisfaction. An engineer's instinct, validated. Aldrin's recorder lay on the console. He did not pick it up. Instead, he muttered directly into the tank's pickup, the way he did when he was too absorbed to remember the device existed. Communication node, cross-dimensional. Architecture includes bilateral handshake protocols. The beacon listens. He paused. A long pause. The throb in the hull seemed to deepen. Gamari analysis confirms it authenticates signals from its designated master before full activation. The Voidflare intended to transmit a coded psionic handshake from a hierarch. The beacon will not complete the call without it. Hale pushed off the bulkhead. Something cold and sharp ran up his spine and met the guilt head-on. So the beacon needs a master signal to finish the wake-up. Correct. Then maybe we give it a false one. The room went still. The hum from the tank was the only sound. Aldrin's blink was very slow. Lask said nothing. The tension had a weight to it, like the air before a pressure hatch blew. Hale rubbed the back of his neck and dropped his hand. He felt the guilt, still there, still gnawing, but something harder was forming around it, like a bone callus over a fracture. We can't stop the transmission cold, he said. We can't smash it. We can't run. But if it's expecting a password, maybe we can feed it a lie. Tell it to go back to sleep. He looked straight at Aldrin. Is that possible? Aldrin opened his mouth. No sound came. Then he turned back to the tank and began scanning at a pace that looked almost frantic. The Gamari message includes a proposal, he said after a long moment. An offer. They are sending a psionic battery on a courier drone. Estimated arrival 7 hours. The battery is calibrated for a Gamari neural architecture. They intend for an envoy, Clean Pot, the one who sent the message, to link with it and project a shutdown command into the beacon's handshake protocol. It is a suicide mission. The energy drain of sustained psionic transmission at this scale would destroy any operator's identity trace. The Gamari are willing to accept that cost. Lask crossed her arms again, tighter. That's noble. Also stupid. We don't have a Gamari on board. No, Aldrin said. We do not. He was reading faster now, his voice flattening further, the way it did when he was sifting data that unsettled him. But the battery's calibration data is appended, and I am reading the fine detail. The beacon's authentication protocol is not a code. It is a biometric recognition of the Voidflare hierarch's psionic signature. The Gamari battery can mimic that signature, but only if the operator's own neural pattern is sufficiently chaotic. A crystalline consciousness, a Gamari, is too ordered, too harmonious. The beacon's degraded systems would reject it as noise. He stopped scrolling. His finger hovered. A human neural pattern, on the other hand, unpredictable, adaptive, messy in exactly the way a Voidflare hierarch's own erratic energy signature would register. If a human were to link with that battery and push a shutdown command through the handshake channel, the beacon might authenticate it as a legitimate master override. The probability of success is, I cannot calculate it, but it is not zero. Hale said nothing. He could feel his heart beating in the soles of his feet. Which means, Aldrin said, and now his voice was so level it was almost a monotone, if anyone is going to try it, it has to be a human. The playback started again. Cendric's voice filled the cabin, filtered through the tinny speaker of Hale's personal log unit. Belay that, Mr. Hale? We are not jumping blind. We are landing. A pause. A single knuckle tap, audible even in the recording. This is what survey ships do. Hale stopped it. Rewound. Played it again. The cabin smelled of cedar soap. Cendric's soap, sharp and clean and completely wrong for the man who now sat on the bunk with his back against the bulkhead and his eyes fixed on a strip of weak amber light above him. The room was bare. No personal effects on the small shelf. No jacket draped over the chair. Hale had not unpacked a single thing. This was still the captain's cabin. He was just occupying it until someone told him to leave. He thumbed the playback again. We are landing. This is what survey ships do. What a survey ship did was get its captain killed. The intercom speaker above the hatch hummed before the voice cut in. Lask's tone had no preamble. Bridge to Hale. Long range just lit up. Hale's thumb stopped the playback mid-word. He stared at the speaker grill. Define, lit up. 8 distinct FTL exit signatures. Voidflare hull resonance on all of them. They dropped out 3 light minutes past Viridia's outer moon, and they are not drifting. A beat of silence. Then the engineer's voice flattened further. We have less than 2 hours before they reach weapons range. Probably less if they push their drives. Hale was already off the bunk, the log unit clattering onto the thin mattress. Aldrin, where is he? Science Bay. Want me to patch him? A click, a low thrum of static, and then Aldrin's voice joined the circuit, utterly level. Here, the psionic battery the Gamari sent, Hale said, one hand braced against the cold bulkhead. Can it be repatterned for human neurology? Yes or no? The pause that followed was not hesitation. Aldrin was blinking, slow and deliberate, assembling the answer in the order he wanted to deliver it. The basic interface lattice is universal. A Mindreach psionic template predates species divergence. The battery reads intention, not biology. Human neurology is compatible. Another pause. However, Hale repeated. The disconnect protocol was designed for a Mindreach operator. Their neural architecture partitions memory into discrete vessels. Ours does not. Aldrin's voice stayed flat, But the words came a fraction faster now. A human operator will experience ego bleed, personality fragments rinsing away into the lattice unless they disconnect within the safe window. I cannot predict the exact threshold. It may be seconds. It may be less. Hale said nothing for a long moment. The strip light buzzed overhead. Then the hatch to the cabin slid open without a chime. Taryn Lask stepped through, her wrist comps still live, and throwing pale blue light across her grease-smudged knuckles. She did not ask permission. She closed the hatch behind her and turned to face him in the cramped space. "The battery's charge won't be enough," she said. "Even if Aldrin repatterns the interface, even if the operator holds the link clean, the power budget is too tight. To fake a master signal at the beacon's recorded amplitude, you need at least 18 kilojoules of shaped psionic carrier. That battery holds maybe 12. Hale stared at the wall. The bare gray wall where Cendric had once taped a single photograph. Gone now, packed away by whoever cleared the room. "The plasma lance," he said quietly. Lask's eyes narrowed. "Tune it to the master frequency from the Gamari records," Hale continued, still looking at the wall. "We paint the beacon's sensor surface with it. The lance provides the carrier amplitude, the raw power the beacon expects to see. The battery feeds the authentication packet through the same frequency window." Lask did not answer immediately. Her cheek was working. She was chewing the inside of it, the way she did when a repair problem was both insoluble and irresistible. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a mutter. "The lance was never designed for precision modulation. It fires straight, it fires hot, and it fires for maybe 3 seconds before the thermal bleed cooks the emitter. You're asking me to turn a sledgehammer into a scalpel. I'm asking if you can." "I know what you're asking." She lifted her wrist comp, eyes darting over readouts only she could see. The silence stretched. "If I bypass the firing governor and route frequency control through the comms modulation buffer?" She stopped, ran the numbers. "It would work exactly once, for 4.3 seconds. During that window, the frequency cannot wobble more than 0.02%. If it does, the beacon rejects the signal as noise. And then? And then the precursor finishes waking up, and we all die." She lowered her wrist. 4.3 seconds, Hale. That's the entire margin." He nodded slowly, turned away from the wall, rubbed the back of his neck, a gesture he caught himself making, and stopped, dropping his hand to his side. "I'll operate the battery," he said. Lask's expression did not change, but something behind her eyes went hard. "That's not brave. That's stupid. It's both. And you will make it work anyway." The words landed in the small cabin and settled. The smell of static electricity, the faint sweat on the air, the hum of the intercom speakers still open. All of it seemed to press in for a single held breath. Lask looked at him for a long time. Then she lifted her wrist comp again and began pulling up schematics. "The Gamari frigate has a repair dock. I'll need 4 hours of fab time to rebuild the lance emitter nozzle. We don't have 4 hours. You have 90 minutes? Then I'll do it in 60 and spend the rest swearing." She was already turning toward the hatch. "Aldrin, get the battery repatterned and bring it to the bridge. Hale needs to touch it before he links. Let the lattice map his neural signature. If it doesn't recognize him, the first surge will fry his motor cortex." "Acknowledged," Aldrin said through the intercom, and the channel clicked closed. Lask paused at the hatch. She did not turn around. "Captain Cendric walked toward that beacon because he thought it was his job. You're volunteering to have your mind torn open for the same reason. What happens when the next thing asks for more?" Hale did not have an answer. She did not wait for one. The hatch slid shut. He was alone again in the cabin that did not belong to him. The recording still cued to its final moment, the amber strip light still buzzing overhead. He reached down and switched off the log unit. The bridge was 2 decks up. He started walking. The intercom woke again before he reached the ladder. Clean phase bell tones translated into clipped, precise words, their harmonics stripped of all diplomacy. "The Voidflare fleet has cleared the gas giant's gravity shadow. 7 ships in attack formation." A transmission is coming through on the beacon's resonant channel. A pause. A chime of something that might have been dismay. "The hierarch Esion is demanding unconditional surrender within 1 hour, or it will burn Viridia's atmosphere to plasma and sift the beacon from the debris." The first salvo struck the Gamari frigate amidships. Klein Pa felt the impact as a dissonant shiver through its crystalline structure, a wrong note that propagated from facet to facet before the harmonic stabilizers could dampen it. The observation dome polarized deep amber, bleeding off radiation that would have shattered lesser materials. "Return fire," Clean Potch chimed. The command vibrated through the ship's command lattice faster than thought. 4 Voidflare warships had broken formation, their dark energy hulls bleeding violet contrails as they looped toward the rogue planetoid. The remaining 4 pressed the Gamari position, spines already gathering liquid light for a second volley. The frigate's crystalline discharge answered, precision beams of refracted starlight that lanced out and caught the lead Voidflare vessel across its primary spine. The enemy ship shuddered. Its dark hull cracked, violet light spilling out like arterial blood before the wound sealed itself, scar tissue black knitting across the breach. Clean face facets dimmed. The frigate could not sustain this exchange. The humans needed minutes they did not have. "Signal the Cendric envoy," Clean Fa chimed. "Request reinforcement. Priority urgent." Ciro's response came flat through the translator link. "The Cendric are 12 minutes from emergence. We have 7 at most." Then the human ship did something. On the Lux Aeterna's bridge, the air tasted of ozone and wet stone. An impression that did not belong there, that had no physical source but hung in Hale's awareness anyway. The psionic battery pulsed against his thighs, warm and far too alive, its crystalline lattice drinking the neural energy he was bleeding into it. The wires at his temples itched. He could smell his own memories. That made no sense, and made perfect sense. The scent of the ocean where he learned to swim, the burnt sugar tang of his mother's kitchen, the copper reek of Cendric's blood on the observation deck. Each memory fluttered past like a page torn from a book, and he could not hold them. He could only watch them go and hope enough of himself remained when the battery was done. "Lance tuning at 78%, Lask called. Her voice reached him through layers of static. "Frequency drift is .03 and falling. Hold on, Hale." He wanted to answer. His mouth had forgotten how. Aldrin's voice now, flat as ever, but faster than Hale had ever heard him speak. "Beacon pulse accelerating. The precursor is tasting the carrier wave. It knows something is wrong." Through the psionic link, Hale felt the beacon as pressure behind his eyes. Not sound, not heat, but a subsonic dread that vibrated in the hollows of his bones. The authentication packet Aldrin had encoded sat in his mind like a foreign object, a splinter of data wrapped in neural pattern. He had to push it through. He had to hold the pattern steady for 4.3 seconds. The plasma lance fired, not as a weapon. The beam that lanced from the Lux Aeterna's bow was no broader than a human arm, tuned to a frequency no ship's weapon was ever meant to emit, the exact pitch of the precursor's recorded voice, extracted from the Gamari sensory history and painted directly onto the beacon's sensor node. The lance's heat turned the vacuum around the beam path to shimmering distortion. The deck plates thrummed with a frequency that made Lask's teeth ache. "Lock," she breathed. "Frequency lock. It's painting." In the Gamari observation dome, clean Pacious facets flared prismatic white. The humans had turned their only ship-mounted weapon into a carrier signal. They were not firing at the enemy. They were speaking to the beacon in a voice it would recognize. "Zero," Kleinpaw chimed, its harmonics sharp with disbelief. "Record everything." Exion's broadcast slammed into the human comms array with the subsonic weight of a physical blow. The Voidflare hierarch's voice, if voice was the right word for the pressure wave that formed words in human ears, filled the Lux Aeterna's bridge like water filling a sinking compartment. "The precursor will feast on the neural echo of everyone who dies today. Your fear will sustain it. Your resistance is heresy that will be punished beyond the dissolution of your species' memory." Hale heard it through the haze of the psionic trance. The words registered somewhere beneath conscious thought, where animal terror lived. His heart hammered. His fingers curled against the battery's warm surface, but the authentication packet was already moving. He pushed the fake master signal through the psionic battery, and the beacon's cry flickered. The purple glow that had pulsed beneath the obsidian surface for 12,000 years stuttered once, twice, 3 times. Hale felt the beacon's attention shift like a great weight turning toward him, and every instinct screamed that being noticed by something that old and that hungry was death. 1 second. The plasma lance held its frequency. Lask's hands hovered over the tuning controls, knuckles white, grease still embedded in the creases of her skin. She did not blink. 2 seconds. Aldrin counted under his breath, the numbers falling from his lips in the same dead monotone he used for everything, except his knuckles were bone white against the console edge. 3 seconds. Exion's transmission cut into a rising harmonic. The Voidflare hierarch understood too late what the humans were attempting. Pressure built in the comms channel. A scream forming. 4 seconds. Clean Pa watched the beacon's energy signature collapse. The purple glow strobed once, white hot, searing afterimages into every optical sensor in the system. Then the light cut out entirely. The silence that followed hit like a physical blow. 12 millennia of subsonic hum, gone in an instant, and the absence was louder than the signal had ever been. 4.3 seconds. The beacon went dark. The Voidflare fleet shuddered. Cohesion bled from their formation like heat bleeding from a corpse. Dark energy hulls flickered and dimmed as the precursor's power withdrew from their systems, yanked back through whatever dimensional tether had sustained them. One warship listed, another's spines retracted, the gathering light dying before it could form. Exion's broadcast terminated in mid-syllable. The hierarch's pressure wave voice cut off with a wet, sudden silence that left the human comms channel ringing. Hale slumped forward. The psionic battery tumbled from his lap, dead crystal now, its warmth fading. The wires at his temples pulled taut, and one of them snapped, leaving a thin line of blood along his hairline. Bren? Lask was already out of her chair, crossing the bridge in 3 strides. Bren? No response. His eyes were open but empty, pupils fixed on something that was not the bridge, not the dimmed lights, not her face. Bren? She grabbed his shoulders. Her grip left grease smears on his uniform. The second time his name left her mouth, it cracked. He blinked. The emptiness in his eyes receded slowly, like tide pulling back from sand. And for one long moment, there was no recognition in his face. He stared at Lask as if she were a stranger, as if the bridge were a place he had never seen, as if his own name had no meaning. Then he blinked again. Did it work? His voice was raw. The question came out thin and cracked, a whisper from a throat that had forgotten how to speak. Aldrin turned from his console. The xenolinguist's face was as blank as ever, but his hands were shaking. He did not seem to notice. His voice, when it came, held the same dead flatness it always held, and yet something behind it had fractured. Some wall that had been there since Hale first met him, and the single word that fell out of him carried more weight than a screamed prayer. Yes, Lask let out a breath she had been holding for 4.3 seconds in 3 hours in her entire adult life. She did not let go of Hale's shoulders. He did not ask her to. In the Gamari observation dome, clean face facets shifted through colors that had no name in any human language. The crystalline envoy watched the Voidflare fleet scatter, their dark energy signatures bleeding away into the nebula's outer filament. It watched the human ship hang motionless above a dead beacon, its improvised weapons still glowing faintly at the bow. The precursor's energy signature has withdrawn, Ciro reported. The dimensional fold is stable. The beacon, it is no longer transmitting. Klein Fei's inner resonance went very still. When it spoke, its bell tones were soft, almost reverent. They did not understand what they were doing. They could not have understood. A pause, crystalline facets catching the distant light of scattered warships. And they succeeded. Ciro said nothing. Then Aldrin's console flagged a new contact. The beacon was quiet. Its surface had gone cold, the obsidian substance no longer drinking ambient radiation. But something deep inside the dimensional fold, something beneath the silence where the precursor had been chained, had just moved. The sensor log refreshed once, twice, and the xenolinguist read the single word that resolved on his screen. His hands stopped shaking. His voice, when he spoke, was still flat, but flatter now, pressed thin by something that might have been the beginning of terror. Captain Hale. Hale looked up. Lask's hands were still on his shoulders. The blood from his temple had reached his collar. He was too drained to feel whatever Aldrin's tone was trying to tell him. Report, he managed. Aldrin stared at the screen. The word glowed there in alien script the Gamari database had helpfully translated. A single acknowledgement from something that had not been meant to wake, had not been meant to hear a false master, had not been meant to find the signal convincing. Acknowledged. The air in the assembly chamber tasted sweet and faintly metallic, warm against Hale's face. The walls curved upward in seamless crystal arcs, refracting the light from no visible source into soft rainbows that drifted across the delegates like slow aurorae. Breathing felt strange here. Too easy. The Lux Aeterna's recycled atmosphere always carried a thin edge of ozone and old filters. This place wanted to be pleasant, and that very kindness kept Hale alert. He stood in the center of the floor, Lask to his left and Aldrin to his right. Neither spoke. Lask had cleaned her hands for this. Really cleaned them. The grease gone from her knuckles for the first time since he had met her, and the absence made her look younger and more dangerous. Aldrin clutched his audio recorder, but had not spoken into it once. The holoscreens ringed the upper curve of the chamber. 3 of them flickered with the forms of ambassadors who could not attend in body. The abyssal, a shape of drifting bioluminescence suspended in a globe of pressurized water. The root mind, a dense tangle of fungal strands that pulsed in slow rhythms. And the quartzar, a shard of angular silicon that never stopped glinting as it rotated. Their real forms were light years distant, but the holographic relay gave them weight in the room. Clean Pa stood opposite Hale, its crystalline body catching the ambient light and scattering it into shifting prismatic polygons across the floor. The Gamari envoy had been silent for a long moment, its facets flickering through patterns that Hale still could not read. Then it spoke. The bell-like harmonics rose and fell, and the translator rendered the words in a tone it had never used before. The label on Hale's earpiece displayed a single word: respect. The human vessel Lux Aeterna, Clean Pa began, has accomplished what Gamari doctrine declared impossible. The void beacon was silenced not through force of arms, not through ancient protocol, but through an improvisation so reckless that our tactical models still cannot assign it a probability above 0. The envoy paused, and its facets stilled into a steady, deliberate arrangement. I must formally acknowledge this. The humans succeeded where we could not. Hale said nothing. He was too tired for vindication. The residual hum still lived in the back of his skull, a faint, electrical whisper where the psionic battery had drawn from him. He had slept 5 hours since the beacon fell silent, and every hour had been crowded with fragmented dreams in which Captain Cendric's knuckles tapped against something hollow and far away. The root mind spoke next. Its voice was not sound, but scent. The translator synthesized words from the chemical grammar the fungal consensus used, and the chamber filled briefly with the smell of damp earth and old forests. Starkly organic, startling in all this crystal sterility. Lask inhaled sharply beside him. Humanity is a wild card, the root mind said, each word arriving with deliberate slowness. A species that routes weapon power through communication arrays and survives. Dangerous, unstable, but no longer dismissible. The mycelial memory will carry this. The Quartzar ambassador's rotation halted. Its angular face caught the light and threw it back hard. Dismissal is not the question. The remaining Voidflare cells are scattering through 6 systems. They believe their precursor was merely delayed, not denied. They will try again. There must be military protocol established immediately. Its voice ground like stone on stone. The humans will be folded into this structure. Their method worked once. Standardized, it becomes doctrine. Doctrine can be taught, deployed, controlled. The word landed in the chamber and sat there, heavy as a dropped weight. Hale felt Lask tense beside him. Aldrin's recorder clicked on, then off. Clean phase facets shifted, but the envoy did not speak. It was waiting, giving him the floor. Hale stepped forward. Just one step. The polished crystal was warm under his boots, and the motion drew every eye and sensor in the room toward him. He did not rub the back of his neck. He did not need to. Humanity won't be conscripted, he said. The Quartzar's facets flared white. You are young. We won't run either. That stopped it. The rotation resumed, slower now, waiting. Hale let the silence stretch. He had learned something from Cendric in the weeks before the beacon, watching the captain let a bridge pause before an order. The quiet could do the work if you trusted it. The beacon acknowledged the signal we sent. That means the precursor knows our name now, or whatever it uses instead of names. It knows we're the ones who shut the door while it was half awake. His voice stayed level, carrying the simple fact without ornament. If another beacon is found, or built, or reactivated from some ruin we haven't charted yet, the entity on the other side won't hesitate. We're not an unknown species anymore. We're a threat it has tasted. The abyssal envoy shifted in its water globe, bioluminescence flaring in patterns that the translator did not attempt to render. When it spoke, its voice was a burbling modulation. Then you accept the military requirement. I accept that we fight. How we fight is the question. He turned, taking in all three holoscreens and clean pod together. A slow pivot that made the chamber feel smaller. You have doctrines, protocols, ways of war that have worked for millennia against enemies you understood. But the precursor isn't an enemy you understand. You imprisoned it and prayed it would stay asleep. When it woke, the Voidflare walked away from their post and started worshiping it instead. Your doctrines did not predict that. Your protocols did not adapt to that. He let the words settle. We did. The root mind's sense signature shifted. The translator hesitated, then said, curiosity, attention. Humanity is not going to be soldiers following alien doctrine, Hale said. We're going to be the ones who adapt when doctrine fails. The improvisers. Give us the problem, not the prescribed solution. Give us the tools, and we'll find uses for them you'd never consider, because you've had 12,000 years to calcify your thinking, and we've had 20. The Quartzar's rotation stopped again. Its voice ground out, slower now. You propose a coalition where humanity holds an undefined operational role. No fixed doctrine, no established chain of command. This is militarily incoherent. It worked. 2 words. Flat, confident. The HFY voice, though Hale did not think of it that way. He just knew it was true. Clean phase harmonics rose and fell. The sound shimmered in the crystal chamber like light through a prism, and the translator rendered the envoy's next words after a pause so long that Lask shifted her weight twice. The Gamari will agree to this arrangement. The envoy's facets caught the light and scattered it in patterns Hale had never seen before, softer, less angular. With conditions, we will provide resources and intelligence. We will not command human operations. You will report outcomes, not plans, because I suspect we would not understand your plans anyway. The admission cost Clean Pasha something. Hale could see it in the way the envoy's facets dimmed momentarily before steadying. An old pride, bending. The root mind followed. Conditional assent carried on a wave of petrichor and loam. The abyssal concurred in a cascade of bioluminescent pulses. The Quartzar held out longest. Its rotational silence stretched to 15 seconds before it said, conditional, provisional, subject to review after first engagement. But yes. Hale nodded once. Not triumph. Acknowledgement. He looked around the chamber and understood, with a clarity that had nothing to do with psionics, that something had shifted permanently. He was not the junior officer who had watched Captain Cendric reach toward an obsidian pillar and vanish in a ripple of purple light. He was not the terrified acting commander who had screamed at Lask to route the plasma lance into the comms dish. He was the voice of a people who had just announced themselves, not by conquest, not by superior firepower, but by solving a problem no one else could solve, and then standing in the aftermath and refusing to be owned. He was tired. The ache in his skull pulsed softly, a ghost signal from the battery that might never fully fade. But he was not afraid. The neck-rubbing habit was gone. He had not even noticed when it left. The assembly dispersed in slow, ceremonial fashion. The holoscreens flickered out one by one. Clean phase facets dimmed to a resting configuration, and the envoy withdrew through a crystalline archway that sealed seamlessly behind it. Lask exhaled, a long, shaky release, and muttered, I need a drink and a problem I can fix with a wrench. Later, Hale said. Aldrin had not moved. His recorder was in his hand, but he had not raised it to his mouth. His flat voice, when it came, was quieter than usual. Hale. Something in the tone made Lask stop halfway to the archway. I finished the signal analysis. The last transmission from the beacon, the acknowledgement pulse. The one we assumed was the precursor confirming receipt of our stand-down signal. I remember it, Hale said. That pulse had felt like a door slamming in his mind, a finality so absolute that he had nearly collapsed across the Science Bay console. It was not the precursor. The residual hum in Hale's skull sharpened. Nonsense. He said nothing. The frequency architecture is wrong, Aldrin continued. And now he did raise the recorder, as if needing the familiar gesture to anchor himself. The precursor's signal signature was recorded by the Gamari 12,000 years ago. What answered our transmission was similar. Close enough to fool the beacon, obviously. But the harmonic decay pattern is different. Older. Much older. Lask stepped back toward them. Older than 12,000 years? Considerable older. Aldrin blinked once. Twice. And it is not inside the dimensional fold. The signal originated from real space. This galaxy. I was able to get a rough vector before it terminated. The chamber was very quiet. The sweet air pressed against Hale's skin, warm and wrong. Where? He asked. I do not know where, but I know it is moving. Aldrin looked up from the recorder, and his flat, steady voice held something Hale had never heard there before. Not quite fear. Wonder. Something acknowledged us, Bren. Something older than the thing we just stopped. And it is out here with us.